training, the one that's not broadcasting.
Hidden access point. There's no password on it. It's just a
Good security.
It's so old. It is a WAP 54G. That gives you an idea how old it is. But not still working. We are recording.
Do you want to do any opening remarks, John?
Yes.
Do you want to turn off the sound so I don't have to hear myself on a
I
30-second delay? Okay, good.
So
Awesome.
won't have to do that.
Would you like to use the microphone for your announcement?
Sure. Hello and welcome to the October Omaha Linux Users Group meeting.
Joined at the hip.
I am I'm John Larson, a systems engineer at AIM here in this building right here. This is our training lab, so welcome to our training lab. Some new faces, some I haven't seen, some I have. So I have not had a chance to really look at any Linux news lately. I've been working on this huge project, finally went live last night, so I'm here on about 4.5 hours of sleep. So, that may be why I'm acting weird. Anyway, Hal is going to talk about command line kung fu this month, correct? Correct. And it's an awesome picture, I have to say, on that front of that presentation. I used to watch a lot of Shaolin movies in college days, so kind of brings it back for me. So, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Hey there. Hi.
Hi.
How's it going? Hey, I'm Hal Pomeranz. That's me on Twitter. Who am I? So I'm a consultant, and I travel all over the place. I've been on the road since July 14th, I think. Have no real plans to go home. So I'm traveling around doing computer security, computer forensics. I'm also do a bunch of training for SANS, which is how a lot of people may know me. I'm the track lead for completely minimally documented feature in the GNU date command that allows you to convert epoch time values. All right, so that's trick number one, right? And that one, I mean, if you combed through the info page for the date command, it's unlikely that you would actually see the small paragraph of text that documents the fact that this feature exists. Somebody pretty much has to show it to you. And once they show it to you, you're like, oh, that's obvious. I knew that all along. So let me see. I've got a sample audit log file here. And let me grab one of these epoch time values out of it. And so the syntax is date minus D and then an @ sign and the epoch time value. And that actually will convert it into a human readable date for you. Awesome, right? Okay. So that alone was worth the price of admission, especially considering you paid nothing to be here. So yeah, so that's actually pretty useful. I use that all the time in my forensics work because I very commonly run into timestamps that are expressed in that format. By the way, let me show you another, as long as we're on the subject of time, I mean, it's unrelated to this challenge, but let me show you one other cool time-related thing. Time zones can be set on a per shell basis. There's actually an environment variable called TZ that allows you to set your time zone. So we're here in US Central Time, but if I export TZ equal to, I don't know, US Pacific, my home time zone, and I do that date command again, you can see that the output gets expressed in Pacific time. And you, again, it's useful to me in a forensics context because I'm constantly having to change my time zone to match the system I'm analyzing. Anyway, just time-related craziness there. All right, so we can pull out, if we can pull out the epoch time values, we can convert them to human readable timestamps. And I could play games with, you know, the formatting with the date command and make the timestamp look any way I want, but I'm not going to get into that. So the next trick is then pulling the epoch time values out of the audit log line. So let me pull up one of those audit log lines. All right, so here's one, right? And you can see that the epoch time value sits right up here after, you know, audit parentheses, and then there's a bunch of digits, right? Okay, so you want to pull a value like that out of a line like this. What are you thinking as far as Linux command line primitives that would be good for doing that? Yeah, I'm in favor of sed. Mostly, I'd use cut if the data were, you know, like more rigidly delimited. But this is just, I mean, essentially free-form text. So I think sed is the right thing to use here. So if I you know, pull out that one line again, and my set expression would be basically, I want to eliminate everything except for the epoch value from that line. So it'd be something like dot star audit paren, and then what I want to match is the digits that follow that, and I'm using the backwhack parentheses to make that a sub-expression, which I can use on the right-hand side of the substitution. Followed by anything, and I want to replace all of that with the digits that I matched, basically the first sub-expression. So it goes like that, right? So this matches, the dot star matches anything up to, you know, the audit parentheses, and then I'm creating a sub-expression out of the string of digits, so, you know, 0 or more digits, followed by anything, and I'm replacing all of that with just the digits I matched, right? So regular expressions for the win, yes. Okay, so sed lets us pull out the epoch time value. Date lets us convert epoch time values. So now we have to glue them together, right? Somehow I have to take the output of a command like this and stick it up into that part of the date command, right? Which calls for a little backtick action, or $paren in bash. So it would be something like this. It would be date minus D @ $paren. Well, that command I just ran, so bang bang will give me that, and it should work fine. Right? So take the output of this whole pipeline and substitute it into the date command after the @ sign. Boom, right? Great. So we can do that for one line. Now we need to do it on multiple lines. Well, that sounds like a loop to me, right? I mean, we have to do a loop to read the file line by line and then basically do that on each line. So so the common, shell idiom for reading a file would be something like while read line do, right? And what we're going to do is I want to output basically these human readable dates followed by the original line that I'm reading, right? So let me do this on multiple lines so it's a bit easier to read. I'm going to echo, okay, and what I first want to echo is basically one of those date commands, all right? So I want to echo the output of date minus D @. And this is why you use $paren here, because you can nest $paren. You can't nest backticks, right? And this is why $paren is better than backticks. So I want to echo the line that I'm reading and then pipe that into my set expression. All right? And that will give me the epoch date from that line. I close off the date command, and then after that, I output the actual line itself. Okay? So I'm basically going to run date on the epoch time value that I pull out of each line. That'll give me the human readable time string, and then I'll just output the line itself afterwards. Right? And you need to tell it where you're going to read from, so you need to redirect the standard input from the audit log file. Okay? And that's my final answer, Regis. I'm going to pipe this into head just so that we see the first few lines and we don't scroll completely off the screen. And there you go, right? You've got the date string and then the line as before. Right? Yeah, thanks. I also do, children's birthday parties and bar mitzvahs. No, I mean, this is cool, right? I mean, this is fundamentally why, Linux is a powerful environment. I mean, it's a programming language, right? The shell is a programming language, and the better you get at, being able to glue together all these primitives, the better off you are. But again, fundamentally, right? We did it piece by piece, right? I mean, the hard pieces were, all right, figure out how we pull stuff out of the line, and then know the trick for converting dates. And after that, it's just knowing the pieces to make it all work together. Yeah, so $paren is definitely a big win here, right? So, all right. Questions about that one? All right. That one's fun. I enjoyed that. I sort of pulled out the challenges that I most enjoyed, from Command Line Kung Fu in this presentation. Let's do another one. By the way, these slides are available from my website, and that URL will appear on the last slide of the presentation. So, but if you can't find my website, you really need to learn to use Google. Because, wow. Okay, so, and in the presentation, I give you all the piece parts, right? And then here's the final solution, which looks like the one I typed up. Awesome, go me. All right. So Jeff Hamer, I'll tell you a little story about Jeff. Jeff was this crazy guy who, when we started, doing Command Line Kung Fu, he would send, well, let's just be nice about it. Jeff would gently correct some of my less perfect shell conundrums. Jeff would always kibitz a little bit and say, oh, you could have done this way and it would have been much shorter. And I'd be like, oh, dang it. And then Jeff started sending us challenges, which, by the way, we really appreciate it. If you have an idea for the blog, after 170 episodes, we're running a little dry on ideas. So anytime you want to send in an idea for us, we'd be more than happy to hear from you. So Jeff sent us this one. Jeff actually works as a release engineer, or yeah, actually still does work as a release engineer. And his problem was, his organization was developing multiple different versions of a particular software package. And every night they were creating these sort of checkpoints for their software development. And the directory was getting, well, cluttered, right? And so the idea, Jeff wanted to create a little bit of command line kung fu that would allow him for, each separate version of the software that his company was producing would delete all but the most recent 2 directories. Okay? So it didn't matter how many, dated directories there were. At the end of the whole command line kung fu, he wanted just the 2 most recent directories for each different version. Right. Okay. Well, let's set up a test case first. And I actually get to use some command line kung fu to set up the test case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of nested loops. I'm going to create 3 separate sets of directories. And then for each one of those, I'm going to create, I don't know, like 5 or 6 data directories. So let's start 2010, 09, 20, and we'll do 21, 22, whoops, 23, 24, and 25. That'll be enough. And then I'm going to make dir $file dash $date. Done. Right? So we've got foobar and baz, and we've got 5 data directories for each one. I want to end up with just the last 2 for each of those 3 sets. Okay. Right. So now you get to play along. So the first question is, kind of what are the piece parts, right? What are the different aspects of this challenge? Whoops. That I need to, I just gave you the answer. So what are the different pieces that you need to sort of work out to make this thing go, right? Right. Well, but you don't know. You don't know that's always going to be the case, and you don't know where to start your counting, right? So, but seriously, like, what are the different things we have to do in order to make a solution here? Okay, yeah. So you got to kind of you got to be able to sort of parse the file names, right? And one thing you're looking for is okay, yeah. So clearly here the file names are broken on dash, right? So we need to split the thing on dash, right? And you're trying to distinguish between like one, like, or in our case, foobar and baz, right? Right. So yeah, so we need to recognize sort of the groupings, if you will. Let's call them groupings. All right. Okay. So yeah, so that's thing one. We've got to recognize the different groups of files that we have. All right, and then what? Yeah, somehow within each grouping, right, we need to figure out what the 2 most recent ones are, right? So yeah, there's some sort of, we have to figure out some sort of way to parse out the date stamps or something to figure out what the 2 most recent ones are. And then, once we parse that out, right, and then blow everything else away, right? I mean, so, yeah, I mean, so that's basically it, right? Okay, so first thing is kind of recognize the chunks, okay, and then find the, most recent ones and then blow everything else away. Okay. So let's take them one at a time. So how would we get the groupings, right? In Jeff's example, the version numbers, or in my case, foobar and baz. Okay, so you're suggesting sed. Yes, so this is the case where I go with cut over sed because it's actually rigidly delimited, right? So, okay, so we've got our directory. So if I just did something like ls pipe to cut minus f1 minus d dash, right, that will give me the first part of the name. Right, exactly. So that'll give me the foos, bars, and bazes, but it'll give me multiple ones of those. I only want one of each name. That'll work. They're already sorted, so I could actually just pipe them into unique, right? ls is going to give me sorted names, right? So I don't even really need to sort. I just need to unique. But yeah, so this is a job for cut because the data is strongly delimited, right? And unique gets me what I want. Okay, so that gives me, I now have the groupings, right? Now the real question, and the tricky part about this one for me when I was actually trying to solve this example on the blog was, how do I pick out the two most recent directories, right? Because let's face it, the Unix command line is really not good at data arithmetic. In fact, it sucks at it. Because it doesn't really understand dates. It just sort of understands strings and names and things like that, right? So thoughts about how you might pull out those sort of two most recent.
Does it do number comparison?
Yes, yes it does.
There's your number. Compare 'em. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, how would you suggest?
Sort them on. Sort minus n minus
Okay, you're on the right track.
That would
Because I heard sort minus r.
ls type in
Go ahead.
type it through ls.
So I heard ls pipe to sort, and I think that's right, right? But I mean, if I just do an ls, right? Let's do this. Let's do ls bar star, right? Okay. Oh, let's do ls minus d. Ls minus d bar star, since they're directories. Okay. That gets me the directories in sorted order. I mean, so. But there is a trick with sort in all of this. I'll give you that hint. Reverse sorting is actually really useful here. So you're right. So if I do this, so if I pipe that into sort minus r, right, I now have the directories in sort of descending order, okay? And now, the trick is, when I first started thinking about this problem, I thought, okay, I've got to pull off the two most recent directories because they're the ones I want to keep. But then I realized I was thinking about it backwards because the task is actually to delete the ones that aren't the two most recent. So in fact, what I really want to pull out of this is everything that's not the two most recent things. Or in this case, everything that's not the first two lines of this output. Everything else is what I want to remove, okay? And so, given this output, how would you get everything except the first two lines? There's a Unix primitive for this. Correct. It's actually +3. So the primitive is the tail command lets you pick lines starting from the beginning of the file. So if I say a tail minus n plus, it basically says, give me all of the output from line n onward. And I don't want line 2. I actually want line 3 onward, right? Because I want to skip the first 2 lines. So yeah, but you're on the right track. Goes like that, right? And so those are the things that I want to delete, okay? Right? Well, okay, so the rest of the solution's easy, right? Okay. Given a list of file or directory names like that, how would you remove those directory names? Does anybody know the Unix primitive for that one? Xargs is your friend, yes. So Xargs takes a list of arguments on the standard input and runs a command with those arguments. And in our case, that command would be rm. Well, to remove a directory? Yeah, right. Or, well, only if the directory is empty, right? Let's suppose that there are files in the directory. Okay, so it would seem to me that I could do something like this. Right? And indeed, if I do ls minus d bar star, okay, I'm left with just the 2 most recent ones. Now that's great. That one takes care of the bar directory, but what about all of the other version directories, right? This is where we kind of have to glue together the solution we had earlier. So what I really need to do is I need to loop over each grouping, right? And we got the groupings, so for base name in, and again, I'm going to use $paren here, ls pipe to cut minus d hyphen minus f1 pipe to unique, right? That got me the chunks. I'm going to do, well, basically the ls pipeline that I just did, except that I'm going to do ls minus d $base name star pipe to all of this craziness. Right? Done. Right. So loop over the chunks. Here, let me get that up top of the screen there for you. Loop over the chunks, which we pull out with that ls pipeline, and then basically do the xargs thing that we did for just the bar example. Right? Sweet, right? Jeff's instruction to me was unclear, right? It was not clear to me that there would always be like this monotomically increasing list of directories. So, yeah, I mean, so always assume, I mean, if it's easy, I mean, always just assume the worst case scenario, which is they're just going to be created semi-randomly, and, you know, you have to clean up whatever's there. That's what makes, you know, like numeric balancing of this difficult, right? Because you don't know ahead of time like what the directory numbering is going to be. So anyway, yeah, that gets you where you want. So again, you know, figure out the piece parts and glue them together in interesting ways. And the really tricky part was, to me, was sort of reversing the problem and realizing that what I was actually trying to get was the names of the directories I wanted to remove, not the directories I wanted to keep. I chased my tail on that for a while. Like, oh yeah, okay. Huh. Because ultimately, you got to get it into xargs rm something, right? Okay. Clear?
Now, what if you had someone go in and create directories for tomorrow and the day after?
That's fine. I mean, this doesn't matter. I mean, if you want to create directories in the future, it's still going to get you the 2 directories that sort alphabetically first in the directory listing.
If there's only one directory day, or only one directory on a day, because you're using the tail plus 3, it's going to skip those anyway.
Yeah, it's going to, right, it'll be fine, right? I mean, for example, if I did an, let's say an rmdir on that one directory, and then I did the same for loop, I still end up with the same thing, right? So yeah, so it handles the case where there aren't enough directories gracefully as well because of the tail. So, all right.
It's great to tell somebody makes a couple empty directories and erases all your source code. Yeah.
Well, that's not really my problem here. You know, I was told to leave all but the, you know, leave only the 2 most recent directories. If you do something pathological, you know, this is why we have backups, right? This is why we have source code control. I mean, honestly. Okay. Okay, and so again, my Prezzo has all the little piece parts for you. Huh. Yeah, it looks a lot like the loop that I did. Go me. No, seriously, this one's sort of a performance art piece for me. I'm kind of making it up, remaking it up as I go along. So this one, just to show you that like the bash shell is completely bloated with features. Did you know you can do this in bash? You can actually use this dev TCP hostname port thing. You can pipe output into it, so it's like netcat built into the shell, basically. Yeah, it's like, really? Really? There are some, for a long time, the Debian package maintainers didn't include this functionality in the bash shell that they compiled, although it's there in modern Debian releases. But yeah, I mean, let's just look at that for a moment. And this isn't a property of dev TCP in Linux. This is a syntax that's built into the bash shell. It recognizes dev TCP / hostname / port as an inter-process communication mechanism. Really? Awesome. So Ed Scotus, who's my co-author on the blog, did this whole presentation which he calls Netcat without Netcat that you can Google for. And he does all these crazy tricks. He basically does a reverse shell using output redirection in this. It's nuts. But at its simplest, you can actually use this as a port scanner, right? You just try and direct output to, you know, dev TCP, some host, some port. And if the port is open, if there's something listening on it, you won't get back any output. This will succeed. I mean, you're sending null output, so you're not going to get anything. But if the port is closed, if there's nothing listening on the port, you get an error message. And actually, the command returns with an error that you can test in the shell, right? So we can make a simple little port scanner out of this. It's kind of primitive, but honestly, if you're on a pen test and you know you're pivoting off a system where Nmap isn't installed, this looks pretty good, right? So let me just give you the example that I showed you in the book. So if I do echo and I send that to, you know, dev TCP 127.0.0.1 localhost 22, right? That one works because I have an SSH daemon running on this machine, but I don't have telnet working. So that one blows up, right? Okay, so we can use that to basically say live or dead. And to do that, we're actually going to use logical operators in the shell. So here's my, you know, trying to connect to port 22. And I'll use double and. So if that evaluates to true, i.e. if the port has something listening on it, then I'll do whatever command happens after the short circuit and operator. So in this case, I'll say, you know, 22 TCP live. Oh, I need to do an echo in front of that. Yeah. Right? Otherwise, say 22 TCP. Oh, thank you. Actually, let's just do this. It's a little bit easier. All right, so yeah, so if true, then echo live. Otherwise, echo dead. I mean, so you could use these logical operators like a cheap if-then-else statement without all the nasty mucking about, right? Sweet. And if I do that on 23, it should say dead. Okay. And indeed, it does say dead, but it says dead after all of the freaking error messages, right? I just wanted to say live or dead, right? So I'd like to make this standard error output go away. Anybody remember how to redirect standard error? Two greater than, right? So you specify the file descriptor number in front of the output redirection. Yeah, so you do the number 2 and then greater than, and that redirects standard error. And so we're just going to send that to dev null, right? Huh, that didn't work. Does anybody know why that doesn't work? It's a little subtle. No, it's definitely an error. The question is where the error is coming from, right? So what's happening here is this output redirection is applying to the echo command, which is not generating the error message. What's actually generating the error message is this subshell where we're actually trying to connect to localhost 23, right? Yeah, so the thing about output redirection is that it automatically triggers subshell creation, right? And so, yeah, so this doesn't work the way you think it does because you're redirecting the standard error from the wrong command, okay? And if you really, the easiest way to make this go is to actually put the whole echo dev TCP thing in a subshell by putting parentheses around it. So that forces that whole thing to happen in a subshell. And then we can redirect the standard error of that subshell to be dev null. And this actually gets us the output that we want. Right. Yeah, so the tricky part about output redirection is remembering that you're basically triggering a subshell, and to get the output redirection right requires a little bit of trickery. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to turn this into a port scanner. I actually want to scan a range of ports using this trick. Yeah, so how about a loop, right? Yeah, so a for loop would be good. And I'm going to, and you know, Bash includes a C-style counting loop, which is probably the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to do for I starting with, let's say 1, $i less than, let's just do the privilege port range, and then I++. Okay, so that will count the ports for me. Right, go for loops. Do. And then what I'm going to do is basically this. YouTube channel. We had audio problems then too.
At least we're consistent.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Enterprise Linux, but I like the Sandy movie. Well, thank you, Hal.
Thank you,
John,
Hal.
pleasure as
Thank
always.
you, Hal. Thank you.
And your Twitter is Hal.
It's my first and last name with an underscore.
Okay.
So at Hal_Pomerantz. Again, Google my name. The Twitter is the second, I believe.
Twitter's first. Sandy's
Twitter's first?
Yeah. Sandy's second, then your website's third.
Really? Huh. Wow, I guess that Sans SEO stuff is working out for them.
French National Police switched 37,000 desktop PCs to Linux.
That's good for them. Microsoft will be visiting them shortly, I'm sure.
Yeah,
They're
Microsoft
stronger
is
than the
a
police,
strong arm.
I hear, in some respects. So next month, we're going to be having a presentation by Tom. And Tom, you're going to talk about YubiKeys and authentication stuff.
One-time password.
One-time passwords, okay. So that'll be pretty cool. And look forward to seeing you guys here. So, any questions or other things about the Linux world at the moment?
I'm looking at Reddit right now.
Okay. Nothing? No?
What environment is that?
Oh, this is
Yes, in the back.
this is Linux Mint running Cinnamon.
Rob?
I was sitting on if you have any thoughts on versions of Bash or other shells to stay away from.
The one you don't know.
Yeah.
If you want to read a really funny rant, Google for C shell programming considered harmful. It's a rant that was written probably 15 or 20 years ago by Tom Christensen, and it's really, really funny. I grew up as a C shell user because I learned on Berkeley Unix first, old Sun OS machines, and so I feel that pain. I have those scars, kind of thing. So yeah, that's a good rant. Honestly, at this point, there's been so much convergence between the Bourne-like family of shells. I mean, you know, Bash, Z shell, K shell. They're all enough alike that I don't have a strong preference one over the other, right? But use a Bourne shell type shell, please.
And yeah, that thing about some functions not being compiled into Bash on certain versions.
Debian.
Debian.
Yeah, they finally got over that. I'm not sure.
But you may always run into an older machine.
You sure?
Oh, yes.
I mean, I guess my
That's what I was doing.
different way to ask it is, do you have a script or something that you run to check that you get the right output before you put something in production? In the sense of, this shell does what the shell has always done, versus no, this one has a slight little SCS figure or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, I don't have a script. I have a bunch of experience that keeps me kind of right down the fairway of stuff that I know is common, right? So I don't use a lot of the really cool but fairly esoteric stuff that's on the edges of the functionality of these shells. I pretty much try and stick with stuff that I know works everywhere. And in fact, it's one of the things I try and do on the blog. I mean, people say, oh, you know, there's this cool feature you could have used instead of what you did here. And I say, yes, but I know that that feature doesn't work on these platforms, right? So I stay away from it. And that you know, I mean, it's somewhat limiting, but it means that my code is more portable, right? But it's not like I could just sort of, it's like art. I know it when I see it, right? I know what's dangerous when I see it. I don't think I could sit down and write a list of all the things you should avoid, right? Which is not a really great answer to your question. But the basic philosophy is try and stay with stuff that's common. Don't use a lot of the special sauce, right? And you know, the way to teach yourself that is actually to use, I mean, to really get a copy of the Bourne shell, and use that, or use K-shell, which is probably of the modern Bohr shell variants, the least feature rich, right? If it works in K-shell, it's going to work in every other shell. So.
So you have the shells loaded up and you just tell it to begin, you know, once you got something working, you tell it to run it in that shell.
Yeah.
You test yourself.
So. But yeah, I mean, it's a real problem in heterogeneous environments, right? You've got some Debian machines, and you've got some Red Hat machines, and you've got some Solaris machines, and then you've probably got some really old stuff, legacy stuff lying around, you know, old, I don't know, you know, AIX or HPUX machines or something like that are just weird, right? And you're trying to find some common set of functionality so that your automated scripts can run everywhere. It's not an easy thing, right?
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
Yes, just think of it as a full employment strategy. I agree.
I don't even try and make it, I just do stuff, right now I'm crossing AIX, Solaris, and several flavors of Linux.
Right.
And all I really do is, okay, what are we trying to prove? You know, if you're trying to find something in the process list, basic PS is there. Don't use any of the, what you said.
Right, you can't rely on /proc, right? Because it doesn't exist on some of the platforms you named, and it's different enough among all of the others that, you know, right? So yeah, so you're basically resigned to parsing basic PS minus EF output with awk, right? Go for it. You know, that's your common ground. That's the fairway you've got to aim down. Sorry, but that's just the way it is.
Well, that's reality.
Yeah.
All right.
Great, thanks, everybody.
I gotta
See ya.